Westley Richards is amongst the best-known British gunmakers, but they also made military-style firearms, not just high-end, dangerous game rifles and shotguns. One of those guns is the monkey tail.
So Westley Richards is a venerable English firearms manufacturer. It's been around since 1812 and is still currently manufacturing firearms to this day. In the 19th century, one of their innovative military guns was what we now call the monkey tail carbine. It was an attempt to come up with a single-shot breech-loading, cartridge-firing weapon that was a carbine by nature, something shorter to use while mounted. And it had an interesting lever that popped up from the back of the gun that went over the wrist of the long arm and exposed the breech.
The cartridge itself was kind of a proprietary round. It featured a .451 caliber bullet, and it had a greased wad on the back in its final incarnation. Earlier versions of it didn't, but that's too complicated, and we don't have enough time to talk about that here. Bottom line is that it had a greased wad on the back, and that helped seal the breech when it was closed. On the actual block itself, there was a kind of a little sliding block that when you put the cartridge in, closed it, this block slid backwards and locked the mechanism, gave it a very, 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 very positive lock.
The Westley Richards, unlike a lot of capping breech loaders at the time, made use of a combustible cartridge rather than a metallic cartridge. So this was a paper-wrapped projectile with a felt wad at the base. Now, the reason for the felt wad was they needed some way to seal the breech against excess gas leakage, and that felt was intended to provide that. And so what happened is when you fired the gun, that wad provided that seal and actually stayed in the breech so that when you opened it and were ready to put the next round in, the nose of the bullet on the next cartridge would actually push that felt wad into the front of the chamber, and then that would be blown out with the next round. And it actually had the added benefit of also helping to clean the bore between shots.
So interestingly, these guns, they were intended for the British military, and there were some purchases, yeomanry regiments, that sort of thing would buy them. But the lion's share of these things ended up going to the Portuguese. But of all people, the guys who really liked them were the Boers.
One of the interesting uses of the monkey tail carbine was in South Africa. Now, the Boers, the Afrikaner farmers, living out in the veld, liked this idea of having a breech loader, and it was okay that you had to have a paper cartridge. And they could make these paper cartridges in their homesteads, small farms, way out on the veld. As a matter of fact, in 1881, when the British were decisively defeated in the First Anglo-Boer War, it's been reported that nearly all of the Boers who were fighting against the British were armed with their monkey tail rifles. They're short rifles, they're not quite carbines, they're 24-inch barrel. It was a specific model that they made, simply for the Boers.
Actual British military Westley Richards monkey tails are very, very, very hard to find. I've never actually seen one for sale. Sporting guns you can find, and the Portuguese guns, tons of them were brought in by a company called Golden State Arms in California, back in the early 1960s, late 1950s. I remember as a kid going to Golden State Arms. They had racks of these darn things, and they were selling for about $29.95 or I think $34.95, depending on which variant you got. They had the artillery version, and then they had the cavalry version, or whatever they called it. It was kind of fun because all of these guns are dated like 1867, but Golden State Arms was saying, well, it's possible these could have been used by the Confederacy. Even as a kid, I realized that probably would have been a very, very difficult thing to achieve.